Hi everyone, meet the foster cats, Beluga and Mozzarella. They hate me. I'll cover them up. I don't know how well Robin Ince is known outside of the UK or even within the UK. I'm not about to comment on his career because it isn't relevant except insofar as he has a degree of celebrity, and with celebrity comes a certain amount of power to influence other people. He is a patron of Humanists UK, which I was involved with for 25 years until I resigned my membership because of their support for gender self-ID, which is irreconcilable with humanist principles. And if anyone wants to disagree with me on that, I am interested in hearing your argument. Anyway, Robin Ince has a website at robinince.com telling us that he is a comedian, author, broadcaster and a populariser of scientific ideas. It's the last one of those that concerns me, as someone who for a number of years was also quite active in scientific skepticism. My blog at Skepticate UK can still be viewed, so can my website about the nonsense that is homeopathy, and the website for the Nightingale collaboration, which was the campaigning group my husband ran with my assistants in order to challenge the misleading claims made in advertising by practitioners of various quack therapies. Robin Ince was quite well regarded in the UK skeptic community, and I recall meeting him at some skeptic conference or other that I went to. I can't remember which one. Scientific skepticism, for those that don't know, is about evaluating claims based on reason, on verifiable evidence and critical thinking, and accepting conclusions only as strongly as the evidence supports. It is one of the imponderable mysteries of our time that when it comes to the claims of those promoting gender identity ideology, so many of those who call themselves skeptics absolutely fail to apply those principles. Unlike so many in the erstwhile skeptic movement, both here and across the pond, I am still a skeptic. I challenge claims, I examine evidence, and I will not ring-fence any area of life from skeptical inquiry. That's how I arrived at the positions I hold, whether on climate change, vaccines, alternative medicine, or transgenderism. In fact, transgenderism, or rather so-called gender affirmation, is very much akin to a quack therapy. I do know a number of skeptics who think the same as I do, and it was in an online group of such people that I learnt about the video Robin Ince had posted on his Instagram account that was apparently inspired by the news that Kent libraries had announced that children are not and will not be exposed to adult transgender literature in their libraries. Why would Robin Ince be upset that books intended for adults are not shown to children? The most charitable interpretation that I can come up with is that Robin Ince got the wrong end of the stick. He posted this: "Another day where the focus of hate is on trans people. Disgraceful and unsurprising action by Kent County Council with their removal of trans books from libraries." But they haven't removed any books, so where did he get that from? The story was widely reported. Did he perhaps not read any further than the headlines? So that was his first skepticism fail in that particular post. Or maybe I'm being too charitable, actually. Maybe he really thinks that ensuring children aren't exposed to adult books is an act of hate against trans people. Accompanying that comment was a video he made of himself, and what he said in it so appalled me. I posted a knee-jerk comment that he was a sad loss to scientific skepticism, and I made a note on my list to make a video when I had time. When I finally found the time to start on the video, I returned to his post and I was very surprised to see that he had posted, in response to my comment, 2 comments of his own. The first one says, "So you do not believe in the existence of trans people?" Which I thought was bizarre. I think if somebody had said to me what I said to him, I'd have asked them an open question to try and draw out their reasoning rather than a leading question lifted from the cult playbook. It so happens that I've made an entire video on that very question. It's number 9 in my series of awful arguments by trans activists, and here's a clip. And there was me thinking that I'm getting constantly defamed, harassed and abused by people who don't exist. That 3 years ago I was beaten to the ground by holograms. Now, seriously, I wouldn't be uncomfortable sharing changing rooms with men who don't exist. I wouldn't be angry about vulnerable women prisoners being molested and traumatised by nobody. Nor am I upset about sportswomen losing out on medals and sports scholarships to figments of their imagination. Here are some trans people. Do they exist?
Excuse me, it's ma'am. It is ma'am.
Tough. Yeah, fuck you. Tell me what my bet is, so fuck you.
We got nothing to fucking say to you. Get the fuck away from our...
Get out of his face.
We don't want anything to do with you.
Say one more time so it really penetrates. I am a real woman, okay?
Of course they do. And very womanly they are too, right? So obviously people who call themselves transgender exist. Where we may disagree is over what each of us understands by that term transgender. I would hope that we could all agree on a minimum definition, that a transgender person is someone who chooses to try to present as the other sex to the one they actually are full time for whatever reason. I know that disregards a whole bunch of people who consider themselves under the so-called trans umbrella, but I'm trying to keep this simple, okay? Someone who really buys into the ideology agrees with the Wikipedia definition that a trans woman is a woman who was assigned male at birth. That definition presents an obvious problem for anyone who considers themselves a skeptic, and I find it hard to believe that Robin Ince goes along with the weird metaphysical notion that a woman can be born in a man's body or the other way round. But then I find it hard to believe that anyone goes along with it. But obviously some people do, and they're obviously nuts. But I suspect he falls into the much larger category of people who believe wrongly that all trans-identifying people suffer from gender dysphoria, and it's a kindness to humour them in their delusions. I'll show you the second comment he addressed to me later. Let's see some of his video.
How often can you replace the words common sense, as in a victory for common sense, with a victory for bigotry? That's what's happening in Kent County Council in terms of trans books in libraries, and I can't believe how many years this is going on, this dehumanising of the trans community, and from some places that should know a lot better.
Very clear and specific claim here. Members of the trans community are being dehumanised? How exactly? By removing their books from a library, which of course didn't even happen, but even if it had happened, it might be called, I don't know, unfair, discriminatory even, but dehumanising? What's the reasoning here? It's hyperbolic claptrap and another skepticism fail.
It's pathetic, and it's just basically, it takes all the focus on those people who are really making your life worse, and it's not the trans community.
Who are you to say who is really making anyone else's life worse, you white, middle-class, privileged, entitled man? How dare you? Do you know who Nurse Sandy Peggy is? Unless you've had your head right up your own arse for the past 6 months, you must do. If you don't, then get your head out and read up about her. My website has a page with links to all the news stories. I've made 2 videos about her and I'm planning to make another one soon. Can you even imagine what it has been like for her to go through what she's been put through for the heinous crime of objecting to another entitled man entering the supposedly female-only space where she needed to get undressed? I guess not. Do you even know who the Darlington nurses are? Look them up. And how about the likes of Kathleen Stock, Maya Fulstata, Alison Bailey, Jester Valls, Rosie Kay, Joe Phoenix, Millie Hill, Denise Farmy? These are just a very few of the women, and none of the men, because there are plenty of those too, who have been victimised by people Robin Ince stands with. And I don't just mean they've been abused on Twitter or other social media platforms. They've lost work. They've endured attempts to trash their reputations. Some get followed around in real life by shrieking, hateful mobs.
So intimidation of women is continuing. Police are doing nothing. Fight back!
And by the way, repeatedly referring to the trans community is dishonest. The same dishonesty that got these people called transphobes and bigots for stating a fundamental scientific truth, for being sex realists. I've repeatedly said that it is those who promote gender ideology, the so-called trans rights activists and allies, who are the persecutors. Many of them are not even trans-identifying themselves, and many of those who do medically transition do not participate directly in the vicious behaviour, though some certainly do. Here's an example of one who made newspaper headlines, but most of them don't. The assault on me by three men that Robin Ince would call trans women, I suppose, and I'm guessing thinks should be allowed into women's spaces, was nothing compared to what I experienced afterwards, the bullying, the defamation, the attempts to silence me, and are still happening to this day, not only to me, in fact, much worse has happened to other people who dare to disagree with people who hold the same views as Robin Ince. So don't you dare presume to tell us who's making our lives worse. You don't have a clue.
I may not understand you in your entirety. Who does of any of us?
Absolutely right, but you could try a bit harder. I couldn't find any sign of this man having engaged with any of our arguments. I've had a look around. Someone pointed me to a post on his Substack called The Speed of Hate, which begins with a bit added sometime after he wrote the original post. The addition is about the boxer Iman Khalif saying, I wrote the below post before Iman Khalif was relentlessly vilified and dehumanised by a group of people who decided that she must be trans. Who decided Khalif must be trans? Only Donald Trump, so far as I'm aware. The rest of us were better informed and realised he was male with a disorder of sex development, and this has since been confirmed. Another skepticism fail, Mr. Ince. And yes, Khalif was vilified because he's a cheat who won an Olympic gold for punching women in the face. And he's saying Khalif is the one being dehumanised. He seems to like this word. He uses it liberally, but he can't justify it. Saying men can't be women and shouldn't be in women's sports isn't dehumanising them, is it? Maybe consider instead whether allowing men with all their physical advantage to compete in women's sports, putting them in danger and crushing their chances of winning, is dehumanising, because it's treating sportswomen like they just don't matter, like their physical safety is unimportant, let alone all the years of training they've put in. He then wrote, I also wrote this before the far-right violence across the UK, followed by the vast and peaceful anti-racism demonstrations. What linked the incidents was the speed with which those certain of their hate fashioned these events into what they would have liked them to be. Says the man who clearly did zero research on Khalif or or on what was really being said about him before railing against those who actually care that a man was putting women at serious physical risk with the support of the International Olympic Committee. Here's a video from someone who did a lot of research. And by the way, when someone commented months later saying, "Now it's beyond doubt that Imam Khalif was a boy born with a DSD that made him appear superficially female, then went through a male puberty and is now an adult man. Does this change anything for you?" Nice, calm, reasoned question there, but he could only respond facetiously with, "I guess sometimes the speed of hate is quite slow." I guess it takes more courage and integrity than Robin Ince has to admit that he was wrong. Anyway, I was, of course, being facetious myself when I responded as though Robin Ince was addressing that line to us. I mean, this line.
I may not understand you in your entirety. Who does of any of us?
He's not interested in what we have to say. I get that. What I don't get is why. Women are half the population, and the brainiest and the bravest warriors for women's rights, for gay rights, and for children's safeguarding are on our side. Has Robin Ince even tried to read any of their books or watched any of the videos of the meetings held by the LGB Alliance or the Battle of Ideas or even Women's Place UK with so many brilliant speakers on this topic? Or is he deliberately avoiding seeing anything that might challenge what he thinks because, let's be honest, it's a far safer place to be, a place of blissful ignorance? You know, naivety was always my biggest problem, wanting to believe the best in people, and maybe I still have that problem. But I still find it so hard to believe that Robin Ince, or anyone like him, and I'm thinking now of his fellow supporters of Humanist UK and many of those who have the temerity to still call themselves skeptics. I cannot believe that they have made any serious attempts to get informed, because if they have and yet they still say the stuff they do, then they are wittingly supporting a men's sexual rights movement that has been causing demonstrable harm to many more people than it helps. And that includes children and adolescents.
But my inability to totally comprehend doesn't mean the end of empathy. And I find your identity is easier to conceive than the hatred you agenda with your gender.
Well, the limits to both his comprehension and his empathy are pretty obvious. I don't need to dwell too much on those lines, save to point out that he uses the cult tactic of framing disagreement with the imposition of gender ideology as hate, while ignoring the palpable hate that feminists and our allies have endured for years by trans activists. At this point, I will read his second comment that he addressed to me when I said he was a sad loss to skepticism. He said, "I think the sad losses to skepticism are those that would rather encourage hate than understanding. If our ideas are not driven by love, compassion and empathy, if our ideas are equations that fail to acknowledge the complexity of human psychology, then we will create a cruel world." Which would make some kind of sense if it wasn't glib obscurantist trope. By his own admission, he doesn't understand entirely. Some of us have been researching this for years, Robin Ince, as a result of which we understand all too well, and we want to make others understand too. That's why so many of us speak up, write books and articles, make videos at great personal cost, I might add. Do you think we don't recognise mentally ill fetishist men? Or young men with debilitating internalised homophobia, or the effect that living in a porn-fueled world can have on young women. The fact that we choose not to affirm people in the falsehood they wish were true isn't hate. And speaking of hate, one of my peak transing experiences was seeing the TERF is a Slur website, which had collected screenshots of the most blisteringly vicious comments I have ever seen. Most of them are violent fantasies against women standing up to trans ideology. I have yet to see a TERF say anything remotely close to anything like this. I won't read them out in case they breach the rules of this platform. This is what dehumanisation looks like, not pointing out that men shouldn't be punching women for medals or shouldn't be in women's spaces or removing bloody books from libraries. I'm not suggesting, by the way, that Robin Ince would endorse any of these comments, but in that Substack, he rails against those who respond angrily, yes, sometimes with abuse, at those who make easy proclamations of support for trans rights, otherwise known as trans privileges, while, like him, they refuse to engage with the substantive points being made about the negative impact that trans ideology is having on people's lives. And that includes the handmaids he lauds as great feminists like his mate Josie Long. They're only feminists if they agree with him, apparently. The point of feminism is female liberation, not male entitlement to redefine what it is to be a woman. The point is to make things better for women. Gender ideology makes things worse, and we are sick of this shit. A self-declared feminist who supports women's rights, but who allows that a man can be a woman if he says he is one. I mean, that's like the vegan who drinks milk. You can be admirably strict about not using any other animal product in any shape or form, but if you drink cow's milk, you're not a vegan. If you support male entitlement to call themselves a woman and access our sex-based protections, thereby eroding them, you're not a feminist. Now, what's your blood pressure, people?
Always space within the papers for the story of a fictional trans rapist, not so much for the real cis male abuser. After all, it was his right to use her.
I don't seriously expect Robin Ince to watch this video, and to those who are watching it, I don't expect to have to explain what's wrong with what he's just said, but just in case, here are some trans rapists. The only thing fictional about them is their identity, which is as fictional as that of every other trans-identifying person. But they have caused unimaginable trauma for their victims, some of whom were minors. Again, I've made a video about this very topic, discussing it in some detail. The video is called The Predator Fallacy because it was inspired by someone else who, like Robin Ince, was keeping their eyes and ears shut and going la 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 la. One of the most infuriating and insulting things the media does is report crimes by men like these as if they were committed by women. Some of you may have seen my recent post on X. This wasn't about a rape, it was about a horrific murder, and I collected just a few out of dozens of headlines calling the gay man, the trans-identifying man who'd killed his husband with a samurai sword, a woman. I don't expect Robin Ince to have a clue just how offensive that is, and I wonder if any of those feminists he so admired are okay with it. Presumably they are, since they think, or pretend to think, that men can be women. The bit where he says,
not so much for the real cis male abuser,
is obviously ridiculous because, of course, the papers are always reporting crimes by the male abusers who don't wear frocks. This is just brown-nosing and virtue signalling on Robin Ince's part, when his time would be better spent explaining what he thinks is the bloody difference between those he calls trans women and cis men. Oh, of course, it's the complexity of human psychology. There's probably another 100 words of this utter crap, but I'm just going to show one more line.
Better to make the trans child hide, better death by suicide than the offence of being beyond your imagination.
Shameful. This man, who boasts of being a populariser of scientific ideas, has gone with one of the most dangerous myths that is promulgated by the gender cult. The notion that if a child or adolescent isn't affirmed in their gender identity and set on a pathway towards lifelong unnecessary medical treatment that will most likely damage their fertility and carries other serious risks, they will commit suicide. Parents have been emotionally blackmailed by this scientifically unsupported claim, and some of the consequences have been horrific. But that's for another time. So, to sum up, Robin Ince has no arguments. That's why he resorts to condescending us with the suggestion that we are the ones who don't understand. That's why he calls those he can't defeat haters and bigots. Why is he aligning himself with this deeply misogynistic and homophobic ideology? Only he can answer that, but my guess is that he's just another coward who fears the impact on his career that standing with all scientific truths would have. That's all.